Hello, my name is Caldwell, and tonight I'm here to inform you on a movement within evangelical Christianity called New Monasticism. I want you to look at this picture. This is the first site that I saw walking into the Simple Way, which is a new monastic community in Kensington and Allegheny, Philadelphia, one of the worst neighborhoods. Now, this looks pretty innocent at first, but it's actually a visual to commemorate somebody who was shot and killed at that spot 2 weeks before I showed up. As he died, the members of that community held him and showed him Christian compassion and love. So for me, this picture, within itself, is a full definition of new monasticism. I'm actually involved with these communities somewhat, so therefore I have a little bit of credibility to speak on the matter, and I've also researched them a little bit. And it is my firm thesis that the new monastic movement is an indispensable and valuable witness of the love of Christ in the midst of inner city violence, as well as a reform movement for evangelicalism. First, I'm going to define new monasticism for you. Then I'm going to contrast new monasticism with the old. And I'm going to look to personal stories instead of statistics because I think those will speak greater volumes. Next slide. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in 1935 letter to his brother, said that the restoration of the church will surely come only from a new type of monasticism. He says it's not very comparable to the old except that it lives a life of no compromise. New monasticism is an evangelical movement where members share their resources. They witness to the inner city, America's poorest neighborhoods, and they adhere to a rule of life much like the old monastics did. It draws from those early monastics in that it's moving away from a compromised Christianity and lives on the poorest parts of American society. There are communities like this popping up all over the place. This is a growing movement. It's very important for you to know about this as an evangelical Christian. Next slide. New monasticism, as I said, is an evangelical movement. Next slide. The 12 marks of new monasticism probably best define this movement. As I said, it's a relocation to an abandoned place within the American culture, sharing economic resources, hospitality, lament for racial divisions, humble submission to the church. Next slide. It nurtures a common life amongst members, much as in Acts 4, supports singles alongside married couples, cares for the land around them. They rebuild the neighborhoods and is a peacemaking witness within that community. Next slide. It's distinctly different from the old monasticism, even though it draws from it. Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, a founding member of new monasticism in the Durham House, says in a San Francisco Gate article that Western culture is becoming fragmented and it seems that the church is somewhat going along with it. He says that we are trying through this movement to repair all these broken pieces by living together in these abandoned places. Next slide. But then he contrasts it with the old monasticism by saying that we're not necessarily celibate. We're not trying to separate ourselves from society and live out in the wilderness as they were and just be internal. They're intentionally engaging these neighborhoods to be a witness for Christ. It's a movement that has a profound effect on the Christian witness. What does it do for these communities is the real question. We have its ideology. Well, it rebuilds these abandoned houses in the poorest neighborhoods in America. It witnesses the love of Christ, much as we saw in the beginning. And it provides affordable housing from those rebuilt houses to the members of those communities that most need it. One such instance is with a young woman named Adrienne Harbison, who was beaten so badly by her boyfriend she lost one of the twins that she was carrying. Distraught, she heard about the Simple Way community, turned to it. They gave her affordable housing and was able to basically put her in a place to better take care of her child, as well as integrate her into the local church community. The profound effects of new monasticism on evangelicalism is probably even greater. Just when things get stale, new monasticism is a visible Christian witness in a realm often forgotten by evangelicals. It also reminds evangelicals that there's a biblical call to justice, to be a witness for Christ. And it moves past all these philosophical, theological, and political debates that we often see that have been so defined in the mass media. It's a newer reformation. Next slide. In conclusion, what we have spoken about very briefly is that new monasticism is primarily an evangelical movement. You have to remember that. It is a missional movement in the inner cities. Though it draws from the older Catholic monasticism, it is nothing like it. It's not legalistic. In essence, it's not a life separate like Catholic monasticism from society, lived in just great solitude, but it is a life separate in society, much as a Christian witness should be. It's a well-disciplined monastic evangelical movement. And we saw that in stories like Adrienne Harbison, who was so greatly and profoundly affected. There's many stories like this. These communities have been around for decades. Next slide. I want to remind you of the quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the great Christian theologian and martyr, of how important this movement is. He says that it's imperative to reform Christianity or the church. It's imperative for the church to have this kind of movement. This is a movement that's slowly coming your way, and it's very important for evangelical Christians like ourselves. You can look up further at thesimpleWay.com or newmonasticism.com. I know I've covered this very briefly. For a greater study on this movement, you can see all the communities nationwide. Thank you for your time tonight. Have a great night. Thank you.